Theme parks are such an oddity when it comes to business type, in that in many ways they reflect the kinds of issues of density and commercial development and attractiveness that face all businesses, but their scale and uniqueness and how people engage with them are so different from that it's hard to categorise them as just another commercial or entertainment area. In this video I hope to do a little deep dive into various little issues that theme parks face from an urbanist perspective in order to foster conversation and kind of act as an introduction to these issues as they arise in theme parks. The first land you will see when you enter a castle-style Disney park is named Main Street, USA. This land is defined by its very old-style American architecture with a range of shops and attractions on the sides, all with a sightline that points you towards the land's central castle. I think what is most noteworthy about this land from an urbanist perspective is how much it tries to capture a historical idea of an American main street, with a streetcar going down the middle and being a space where pedestrians and vehicles share the space. I think it is noteworthy that Disneyland opened in 1955, and Walt Disney World with the Magic Kingdom opened in 1971, a time period that is usually seen as being marked by the decline of traditional American downtowns and main streets. This does lead to a bit of an issue with these kinds of parks, where they can be seen as paywalling a good urban experience, where instead of being able to experience this setting in your local town, you need to pay hundreds of dollars in order to access it in a controlled environment such as Disneyland. One of the OG attractions at Disneyland is the Disneyland Railroad. It is a well-known fact that Walt Disney was a big railway fan in his personal life. He had a miniature backyard railway named the Carolwood Pacific, and this is kind of the sequel to that of sorts. It's a ride which takes you around the park and serves as both a transportation option and as a bit of a fantastical show in certain parts of it. Again, with Disneyland opening in 1955, I think having the park feature a streetcar while the Pacific Electric was being dismantled and a steam train tour is very interesting to note within that context of the decade. Walt Disney World opened a new entertainment district on its land named Downtown Disney. This was mostly an adult-oriented entertainment space with nightclubs, bars and that kind of thing. Over the years, it's been given a rebrand to Disney Springs as a more family-friendly retail and dining area, but the general vibe of it is still there. I think it is also noteworthy that Universal has an equivalent to Disney Springs as well in the form of City Walk. I think the existence of this kind of space outside the parks is an interesting one, and I think the kind of space I would compare it to is something like a lifestyle centre. These are kind of outdoor shopping spaces that are designed to resemble a walkable urban space, but which are often placed in such a way in that they are meant to be driven to and parked at by cars. If you look at Disney Springs and its immediate surroundings, you can see the lifestyle centre part quite well. This is kind of similar to the Main Street USA issue, in which instead of these spaces being built within actual towns, within walking or even just a short driving distance from where people live, they're kind of in an ideal place. The lifestyle centre distinction shouldn't even exist, but in a place like a theme park, it's kind of encouraged in that way. With the commercial spaces of these parks looked at, I also think it's important to go over the issue of density as well. Walt Disney World is kind of famous for having created a term called the Disney Bubble. This was an idea that as soon as people go to the airport, they can be shuttled straight to Walt Disney World and basically spend their entire holiday there without leaving. In years past, they ran a dedicated shuttle, the Magical Express, in order to handle that. Universal in Orlando is also kind of in a similar boat. If you look at their current park, it is possible to walk from hotel to the park quite reasonably, and there are plenty of transportation options regardless. Epic Universe, their new park, is located a bit more of a distance away, but they are building dedicated bus lanes to get people between the two areas, which is a good thing. I think the Disney bubble is an interesting term in park terms because it kind of relates quite closely to the idea of density and transit-oriented development in regular cities. Whereas Disney gets its prosperity from keeping people as close to the property as possible, cities can get their prosperity by ensuring that transit connections and walkability keep people spending in dense mixed-use areas. The difference between the two is actually a lot closer than you might think at a glance. I think one thing that absolutely must be discussed with theme parks is the amount of car parking they require. I think you only need to explore Walt Disney World in Google Earth just to see the extraordinary amount of space that they dedicate to parking. I think there is a problem when the car parking for the Magic Kingdom is bigger than the Magic Kingdom itself. When you look at Hollywood Studios in Google Earth, you're seeing the car parking next to it basically doubles the park's footprint. Something that's kind of funny is that if you look at the official map for Walt Disney World as a whole, they have to include the car parking on it, and they just look like this, which, in my opinion, kind of accentuates how wasteful and ugly it is, more than Google Earth does. To just go over to Universal Studios for a second, I think the land use at Universal Studios is actually quite reasonable. There is lots of parking, but they've put everything in multi-storey car parks, which does cut down the footprint quite a bit. And overall, I think the amount of stuff that they've managed to put within Orlando complex is actually quite impressive. I do, however, have to direct your attention to Universal Frisco, a planned theme park they're planning to build in Frisco, which is pretty much on the northern end of the Dallas sprawl. If you go to the Frisco government website and look at the information on the park, you will see at this stage like it's pretty much all like car parking plans and traffic flow analysis. It's a really good read if you're into this kind of stuff, but once again it just kind of shows how much space needs to be dedicated to parks in North America right now, and how if you really wanted, you could pretty much build a second theme park in the amount of space that's being given over to parking. Meanwhile, I do think we have to go to Asia to illustrate this as well. Here is Tokyo Disneyland. Look at how much parking there isn't. Admittedly, Tokyo Disneyland isn't perfect, but it's not like doubling the size of the park level of space dedicated to it. I think Universal Studios Japan in Osaka is even better at this regard. Here's the parking they have for the park. You could just see at a glance that the space efficiency of these Japanese parks are just miles better than their American counterparts. I think this video wouldn't be complete without a quick acknowledgement of probably the best urbanist park in the world, which is Tivoli in Copenhagen. Pretty much zero parking, it's right next to the city's train station, it's right in the downtown, it's pretty much perfect. The secret to these parks and why this needs so little parking compared to America is just pretty much that they're next to rail stations. Tokyo Disneyland has the Keio line, Universal Studios Japan has the Sakurajima line, and in Copenhagen's Tivoli, they're next to the railway station with the S-Tog and Metro to serve it. I think this is just a great demonstration of how transit access vastly improves the land use quality of these theme parks, and how it can apply to things that aren't theme parks as well. Tivoli is about 90,000 square metres in total. Just randomly, he has 117,000 square metres of vacant car park space right there in downtown Dallas right now. On that topic, I think the last real area to go into is the transport systems in these parks. I've already mentioned the Disneyland Railroad, which is kind of a hybrid of a within the park transport and a ride in its own right. But for a more dedicated transport system, I don't think you need have to go much further than the monorail, which has kind of become an icon of the Disney parks. In Walt Disney World, there are essentially two lines. One that takes a loop from the Magic Kingdom to various nearby hotels around the lake, and another one that connects the Magic Kingdom to Epcot. There's a transfer station between the two right here. There's probably a case to be made that Walt Disney World probably has the most famous monorail in the world, especially as the form of transport has kind of struggled to catch on as a major transport mode elsewhere in cities and the like. There are plenty of reasons why that could be, but I will note that Tokyo Disneyland, in a country which does have a few successful examples of monorails, kind of improves upon the monorail as a transit system in several ways. In particular, if you look at the Walt Disney World monorail interior, you'll see that it's very much tourist theme park spec, in that each compartment is kind of separated from each other. Whereas you look at the Tokyo Disneyland monorail, and it's built much more like a legitimate public transport option, with fully walk-through cars. I think if the purpose of something like the Disney monorail is to kind of act as a showcase of what public transport can be, then in my opinion, the Tokyo Disneyland monorail is a much better example of that in action. There is a part of me that wonders if, like, instead of the monorail, Disney had instead gone with some kind of automated metro system that's more typical of what's actually being built around the world, if that might be more influential in America. That's just kind of a what-if scenario, but nonetheless, I think the monorail being such an icon of the park is, on balance, a good thing. A bit underrated, however, is that these parks often have dedicated bus systems. Both Walt Disney World and Universal Orlando have bus systems that basically connect all the parks and hotels to each other, and for hotel guests, these buses are free. I think this service is noteworthy in that they are possibly one of the most successful bus services in North America, and in a way kind of demonstrate how both density and the ability to connect homes to valuable business and commercial spaces can be, even when you're not dealing with theme parks. Universal Orlando also has a water taxi which very much fulfills the same purpose. The other kind of unique transport option I want to mention with Walt Disney World is pretty new, the Skyliner, which opened in 2019. This is a Doppelmayr cable car system built to connect various hotels to both Hollywood Studios and Epcot. This is probably an unpopular opinion among park fans, but this is probably my favourite transport option in Walt Disney World today. Yes, it is an off-the-shelf Doppelmayr product, and theme park fans obviously aren't huge on the idea of Disney just taking things off the manufacturer line rather than building it themselves. But I think the Skyliner fulfills the best promise of Walt Disney World as this demonstration of how the real world could be in an idyllic form. The Skyliner fills its use well. It got tourist aspects, but it's also a genuinely useful people mover system. I can see people being inspired to go out and advocate for these cable car systems being built closer to home, and I think that is maybe the best success of the Skyliner, especially since, as it is a bit of an off-the-shelf product, replicating it anywhere else isn't as difficult as a bespoke solution like the monorail is. Overall, I think that if I can give one armchair Imagineering idea to the parks, it would be this. To both Disney and Universal. Convert your bus system to trolley buses. You get a new, pretty unique for the region method of transport. You get to tout its eco-friendly credentials. It saves on long-term fuel and maintenance costs, and it just looks cool. These parks basically have the right kind of profile for a trolleybus service, and I think implementing them in these parks could actually be a bit revolutionary in terms of changing the perception of these vehicles. But that's just my idea. I hope they still look into what theme parks have in store in terms of urbanist issues. Is an interesting little deep dive score down, and I hope this has helped inspire you with how you think about these spaces. Thank you for watching.